Coming up on episode 123 of the Behind the Back podcast, NFL free agency. Crazy for one of our teams, not so crazy for another one of our teams. So we break down some of the news that we heard, some of the signings that we brought in, how we feel about what's going on with the Eagles and the Niners this week. And then after that, we pivot over to the Sacramento Kings. They won an exciting game in the Tank Bowl last night against the Indiana Pacers. Devin Carter exploded. We talk about some of the young guys and the impact that maybe some of these wins that maybe not all Kings fan enjoys, but we certainly enjoyed. So we talk about that, what we're looking forward to before we do another draft lottery sim from our new position of second worst record in the league. So with that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan-Agrone, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet Retz. Ben, my brother, free agency kicked off in the NFL. Bam Adebayo put up 83 points in the NBA. A lot of crazy stuff happened yesterday. How are you feeling?
It's been a pretty eventful week so far in sports. I've been eating it up. I've been thoroughly enjoying this week.
Same here, bro. So let's talk about some of this stuff. We're going to start with the NFL, then we'll talk pivot in the NBA here because there's a lot of great stuff to talk about today, as you guys heard in the intro. But we got to start in San Francisco, where one of our two teams had to freaking make some moves in free agency. And the Eagles didn't do much, but the Niners, they made a couple moves. So I'll let you do the honors of breaking down what we've seen so far from the Niners, what's going on, what you're really excited about, who you're most excited about that they've added.
Yeah, so there's a couple big moves that I really want to, have this conversation about and base it around. So I'll just start with kind of the I want to say lower end stuff, but it's just the other transactions. And the other one actually is pretty important to me. I ended last week's pod by saying if the 49ers don't re-sign Eddie Piñeiro, I'm going to crash out. Well, guess what? There's no crash out here. Not this week. You're gonna have to stay tuned for the 49ers losing the Super Bowl next year. That's gonna be my crash out. But no, 49ers re-signed Eddie Piñeiro to a 4-year extension that takes him through 2029. So that was a really solid one. And kind of working down the list, they also they agreed to a 2-year deal with offensive tackle Vidarian Lowe. They re-signed running back Patrick Taylor Jr., re-signed Jake Tonjes. Love that move. Love that guy. And they signed Brett Toth, who Marcos and I'm sure Philadelphia Eagles know all about Brett Toth. So they signed him to a 1-year deal. Linebacker Garrett Wallow was re-signed. John Weeks, long snapper, he was re-signed, and Sam Okwuonu, defensive edge, he was tendered on a 1-year contract. So we'll kind of see how that goes down and that whole situation. But as far as the departures, and this is a tough one for me. Kendrick Bourne left in free agency, and he signed with no other than an NFC West rival, the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I'm going to take a 2-second, maybe a minute here thing on Kendrick. I love Kendrick Bourne. This was his second stop here in San Francisco. And just a smiley guy, a guy who's like always upbeat, a guy you want to have in your building. He's always, putting in the effort. He had those 2 incredible weeks with Mac Jones taking snaps under center there. And it's just fantastic to see a guy like Kendrick Bourne get another shot, a 2-year deal with Arizona on a $10 million contract where he's just been on nothing but prove it deals. Right. And so for him to kind of get this deal was really cool, and to keep his career going after being an undrafted free agent to start. So shout out Kendrick Bourne. Love everything that he's done for the 49ers. I would have loved to have seen him back another year, but he's going to have two really big L's against the 49ers this year that he's just going to have to swallow. So aside from that, defensive tackle Jordan Elliott, he signed a 2-year deal with none other than the Tennessee Titans. He followed Robert Saleh out to Tennessee. I don't blame him. They had a good relationship, and they're going to keep that going. And then wide receiver Sky Moore, who was also the punt returner, kick returner. This one hurts. Sky Moore signed with the Green Bay Packers. So now your special teams unit takes a bit of a hit. You did re-sign Eddie Piñeiro. That was really cool. But, punt return has been kind of a pain point for the 49ers in the past. And they've played with a variation of different players. They even had Debo taking those at some point, depending on how games were going. Now they're going to have to, see if a guy like, Isaac Guerendo is going to be the punt returner. Is it somebody else? We'll kind of see. But as it sits, Sky Moore is a big departure for that unit. So a lot to fill there. But moving on to the biggest things. Let's start with the one that opened up free agency for the 49ers. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't really see this coming. I think, when we talked about the potential free agents and the potential signings that the 49ers would do, I even said last week, I don't expect them to be super active in the first wave of free agency based on, just how the past has been with the 49ers under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. And so I expected them to be, more active in the second wave. We got two signings to talk about here, and the first one happened on Monday. That was Mike Evans agreeing to a 3-year deal, $60 million deal. $16.3 million of that is guaranteed, coming from the Buccaneers after 12 seasons, 11 of which extremely historic. So as I'm sure 49ers fans have heard this, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, but for anybody in Philadelphia who hasn't heard, so Mike Evans was on this tear, 11 straight seasons of 1,000 yards receiving. And he had tied Jerry Rice, legend wide receiver for the 49ers and more, for 11 seasons of 1,000 yards. And he was plotted going into year 12 of getting that, breaking that record and getting his 12th year. And obviously he had some injuries that I'm sure is going to be a point of discussion here throughout the offseason and going into next year. And it kept him under the 1,000 yards considerably. And in fact, under 9 games. I think he played 8 games. So nonetheless, a fantastic run with the Buccaneers. He got his Super Bowl with Tom Brady's. He's now chasing another one with a different opportunity, looking to kind of spice it up on a different team. But just the way that the Buccaneers kind of sent him off and the way that they really nodded to him, he did a lot in the community. He did a lot for that organization. He was I think they even said it in their statement to Mike going out. I think they even said he's the most effective or most something offensive player that they've ever had by a long shot. So he's a fantastic player. So just real quick breakdown. Again, it's a 3-year contract that takes him from 2026 to 2028. Again, it's a $60.4 million contract. Base value of that is $42.4 million. And the guaranteed money on that is 16.3. So the structure of it is heavily incentivized. It's got significant portions based on performance. It's also the kind of deal that if the 49ers feel they need to pivot and move off of Mike, they can do so relatively easy. So it's a really good contract for the 49ers. And in a lot of ways, it's a steal when you kind of factor in the kind of a player that Mike Evans is. So I'm going to toss this over to you before I kind of, get into my takeaways on this. But initial thoughts from the outside perspective on the 49ers signing Mike Evans.
Caught me off guard, for sure. I thought there were a lot of names out there. And I know that once, Alec Pierce and stuff went, that the options out there were different. But what you guys were able to get Mike Evans for, I thought this was a great deal. I think the hard part about this conversation, especially what I'm seeing, is just he's older, the Niners want to add more age to the roster. But I think this is a slight I think they're overthinking it. I think Mike Evans has been the most steady. He's been the most steady receiver of the past decade, one of the most steady receivers that we've had in the league. And he's just a consummate professional, and he just balls. And I think that in a system like this one, he'll benefit a lot from being a true X receiver, and that's going to benefit this whole offense. And he doesn't need 1,000 yards exactly to make a difference for this team. It's just the threat of having Mike Evans, especially if he comes back and he looks good. I mean, I'm other teams, I'm very afraid. And I liked the signing for you guys. I think the argument I've heard the most too is like, how many 33-year-olds have great seasons? And there are a select few, like Larry Fitzgerald, Jerry Rice, like those are the names you're associated with. But I think, again, this is Mike Evans getting slept on. He's been one of the best receivers for a decade now. So I think that this is something that he wants a new challenge. The things in Tampa Bay got really sour with him and Todd Bowles. That's kind of, it fell apart at the end there. So a fresh start. He's going to be rejuvenated. He took the tax cut of California to go from Florida to California to come play for a team that he believes can lead him to a Super Bowl. So I think this is a great move for them.
Yeah, and you said something there that I want to kind of tag off of, and that was that he doesn't need the 1,000 yards to really be effective for the 49ers. There has been one quarterback in the last 20 years who has completed over 50% of his throws into the end zone. I think that's Brock Purdy. Oh, yeah, it is Brock Purdy. So to have a guy, like you said, a true X, and this is also a true X that Kyle Shanahan has never had with the 49ers. To have a guy like that as an option in the red zone, this isn't a hot take when I tell you our red zone presence is going to be a lot more scary this year than it has been in the previous years. I mean, red zone has been a pain point for the 49ers, previously. With a guy like that, if healthy, if playing at the top of his game, you're going to be punching in a lot more touchdowns. So I really love this signing. And like my key takeaways from it, like this is a new chapter for Mike Evans. He left the Buccaneers, like I said, after 12 years. And he's kind of stated like he's seeking a new challenge and he wants another championship ring. And, obviously I heard somewhere, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but there were like 3 or 4 things that he kind of needed to see if he was going to sign on a team. And that was like, they needed to be a contender. They needed to have an elite quarterback, elite offensive play caller, and then like something else. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but like it checked all those boxes. And it's in a division where, he saw Devontae Adams go to the Rams last year and saw how that went down. And it's like, okay, I could do something similar with my career here and potentially give myself one more shot at a Super Bowl. So he makes the 49ers immediately better. And I think the 49ers make him immediately better from a situation standpoint, just considering who's calling those plays and throwing the football. So I really like it for both parties. And while the headline number is $64.4 million, like I said, with his contract, that lower base value of 42.4, it's a team-friendly structure for the 49ers and, likely lower in guaranteed cash than his previous deal. It just makes a ton of sense for the 49ers to do this kind of a deal. It doesn't hurt them in any way. Evans steps into this as a top veteran receiver in a core that needs kind of that veteran leadership. And it's addressing a need for a reliable big body target. So I'm stoked about this signing. I think that, if everything goes well and the subplant doesn't put up some Wilt type numbers, I think that Mike Evans is going to be a really, really good addition for this 49ers team moving forward.
Yes, the substation jokes were going crazy on Twitter after Mike Evans signed. And part of me was thinking the same thing, right? It's been such a storyline now that it's taken over this past year, but man, I think that Mike Evans is going to make a difference for you guys. I think that he needs it. He needed a new opportunity. And this, I think, will accentuate Purdy's strengths, because if Purdy wants to throw those wonderful balls into triple coverage, at least he'll know that Mike Evans will be the guy coming down with it 95% of the time. So I think that's what makes Mike Evans special. That's what makes him, it's like for Niners fans, you can imagine what would like a supercharged Jawan Jennings look like. That's Mike Evans. Like those kind of things that he brings to the table. Mike Evans is just the most solid player you could have had. And speaking of like Kyle Shanahan, he hasn't had an X receiver, not just in his Niners tenure, but he hasn't had an X receiver like this since Julio Jones. So, and I understand 33-year-old Mike Evans. I get that. But like, I think Mike Evans deserves the benefit of the doubt for his consistency. And yes, he's coming off of some injuries, but he's been a relatively steady player his entire career. So I like this. This is, like you said, there's ability to get out of the contract. You're going to get a high ceiling player and raises your floor automatically on an offense that still does have some question marks and still has some things that you guys could fill out here too. But some of these other signings we'll talk about here I thought were great. I think the Niners took a second. It started, like saying both of our teams started a little slow, but the Niners really made some good moves here. So Mike Evans was an awesome signing for you guys.
Yeah, 100%. My last note on it, I watched this little clip. I'm not sure if you saw it, but Ryan Fitzpatrick was talking about his time in Tampa and playing with Mike Evans. And he was like, Brock's going to need to learn to trust Mike in these situations. And I think he's 100% nailed it, because it's like Brock's never had that guy that's been able to go up and on a 50-50 ball almost guarantee you that being a catch. So I think there's a certain level of trust there that'll need to be developed pretty early on. And we might see some growing pains. We might see some scenarios where it's, he doesn't throw the football to him when really Mike Evans can come down with that football. So we'll see what those growing pains kind of look like. But overall, I really like it. Moving on to the next one. And this one happened just a few hours ago. So we're recording this on Wednesday. It's 7 o'clock. We're gearing up to watch the Kings game here. We're going to catch up in a minute. But this one happened late in Wednesday, and that was the 49ers trading a 2026 third-round draft pick for defensive tackle Osa Odighizuwa, and he's coming from the Cowboys. So this one excites me a lot, actually. And like, Mike Evans is awesome. Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. Like, he's fantastic. But for as long as I can remember, I've been saying I want someone consistent on that defensive line to go up, with Nick Bosa and really wreak havoc for these quarterbacks. And we just haven't seen that consistent guy. This is a guy who's fully capable of that. Osa, he's a consistent pass rushing defensive tackle. He brings over 100 quarterback pressures over the past 2 seasons. And he bolsters that defensive line that features Nick Bosa. Odighizuwa, he's under contract for 3 more years. And those salaries are $20+ million in 2025 and 2026. But this trade immediately helps the 49ers fill a critical gap in that defensive front. And it helps the development. I think this is going to be an underrated part of it. It's going to help the development of the young players like Alfred Collins and CJ West, who the 49ers just drafted a season ago. We saw all season long the 49ers struggle to generate any form of pressure under a Robert Saleh-led defensive line. I mean, defense in general, but really the defensive line. That's crazy. That speaks more about the roster than it does about Robert Saleh. Hence why Robert Saleh is a head coach right now. And dude, that team looks nice right now, what they're doing. But the fact that line was so abysmal and so poor at generating pressure, it was an obvious thing going into the offseason that the 49ers needed to make a big move here, whether it was, moving up in the draft and drafting somebody at, early on in the first round to put it alongside Nick Bosa. Michael Williams, also recovering from injury right now, he's fantastic against the run, but he needs to develop that pass rush. So in the run game, it's great to have him, but you just need that pass pressure, and we were getting killed through the air. Immediately adding Osa it helps the team so much on that front. And if Bosa can come back and he's the same version of himself, quarterbacks look out, because this is going to be, it's going to be messy for some of these quarterbacks. That pocket is going to collapse rather quickly, and at very least quicker than it did last year. So Marcos, thoughts on Osa? I know you're familiar with him because of the Eagles-Cowboys rivalry, although, rivalries tend to be two-sided. It seems very one-sided for the Eagles. Thoughts, Marcos, on Odighizuwa?
I think he's an extremely talented player. Last year kind of got lost in the fold with, the whole Micah Parsons trade of it all. Their defense being terrible for the first half of the year, especially. But, he, for the people who know ball, for the people who watch the games, that the Cowboys are involved in with Odighizuwa, his impact is there. It kind of reminds me, and not to this extreme, but it reminds me of Jalen Carter, where the numbers don't show the impact that he has on a given play. He's one of the best players in the NFL against double teams and winning reps against double teams. He was one of the top 10 in pressure rate. He's one of those guys who impacts a play each and every down. But on the back, it hasn't worked out as well for him for getting the big numbers. But I think for what this team, the Niners, are looking for, you guys haven't had a presence like this since Eric Armstead. So I think this would be, he's not as physically imposing, but he is a extremely talented athletic. He has like a 7-foot wingspan, so he has the ability to tip balls. He's just a competitor, and he was loyal. I mean, there was reports coming out when this trade happened. There was reports that the Commanders offered him a ton of money last year in the offseason, and he declined to stay in Dallas because he loved it there and he was building a home there and everything, and now he gets traded. So it's like he's loyal to the teams that that he goes. So I think that if things go well here, there's a potential. That's the other thing too. He's 27 years old. Like this is a kind of player you take a swing on. So I thought that you're giving up a 3rd round pick. Some people said that was high value. I think for a player who's a proven commodity that you kind of know what you're getting, like that's kind of hard, especially for the Niners, who have, no offense, have outside of last year really have struggled drafting defensive linemen. So I think like getting a known commodity in the building and not having to rely on another rookie with these 2nd-year guys, like you get a vet in the building that you can build around. And the same thing with the Mike Evans contract. Like this is a contract you can get out of too after this year if things don't, pan out. So it's like you're taking a risk on a guy who increases your ceiling and increases your floor at the same time. I think this is a win-win for the Niners. And the Cowboys, they got a draft pick. They had some moves that they made that we can talk about during, our offseason talks of it all. But I think losing Osa will matter to them. But they had to give him up because they made decisions with getting Kenny Clark in the building, Rashawn Gary. Like, they made their choice. So him falling into your laps bugs me as an Eagles fan, but it means it's a great move for you guys.
Yeah, I agree. And, the thing with kind of the moves, and I know this is going to come out probably later in the pod, honestly, today. The thing with this move is it's a win now move. This is kind of evident that the 49ers are looking at this roster and saying, yeah, we're in. Like, this is potentially the last run that we're going to really make with this core of players that we've got. And so they take these swings at these two guys, and honestly, like, you and I kind of talked about it off the pod. I don't think I really mentioned it on the pod, so I won't take too much credit for it, but I kind of told you, I was like, I think this would be the year that the 49ers make a splash move, because it's like we hadn't really made that splash move since really Christian McCaffrey, which was that midseason. Since then, it's been relatively quiet, and in general, these kind of moves they aren't really what the 49ers do. They like to, at least they did like to draft and bring those guys up, through that way. So these splash moves were a pretty good indicator of where they kind of view their roster. With Osa, it's like you like what you're getting out of CJ and Alfred Collins, but you feel like they're not quite ready, and you're ready to compete now with a Nick Bosa who's, yes, coming off an injury, but potentially still at one of potentially his peak play. So you want to try and capitalize on that. That's why you get a guy like this. And with Mike Evans, you got a Brock Purdy who's arguably entering his prime right now, based on the play that he's going through. And it's like, you got to get a guy in the building that, number one, is established player, and number two, can hopefully give you some longevity and some lengthy games out there versus like a Ricky Pearsall situation where it's like every other game he's out. So I like these two moves. The thing I'm focused the most on is the Trent Williams situation. Now, I mean, every season it seems like the 49ers do this dance with Trent Williams. I'm exhausted talking about it. 49ers, I'm sure, are, and I know the 49ers faithful fan base is tired of talking about it as well. The latest that I saw that has a good amount of weight was Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show. He said Trent Williams and the 49ers have been discussing a new deal. They aren't shopping him, and he's not expected to be traded. That could change, but I don't think it's realistic right now. And I think a couple of good things to note, and this idea was really brought to my mind by Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers. On March 20th, Trent Williams would be due by the 49ers like a bonus. And mind you, he has no more guaranteed money left on his deal, which is where the kind of snag is on this whole thing and why he wants a new contract is because of the no guarantees. But he gets like a bonus. And so on the 20th, when he gets the bonus, it doesn't make sense for any team in general, and the 49ers in this situation, to trade a player after they've granted him a bonus. So if by March 20th he isn't traded, it's super unlikely that he'll be traded. And at that point you can kind of assume it's likely to go deeper into the offseason, because there's no point for them to really push a signing. Because right at that point he's going to have more leverage than he would say after the draft. So it's kind of a leverage battle, which it always is with these negotiations, but I'm just going to say it like this is the last note on it. Don't expect anything soon with this Trent Williams contract thing. If you're going to see anything, it would probably be a trade. The deal, like a new deal, isn't going to happen for probably another few months. So that's kind of my take on it. We'll see how this shakes down. Everything's very liquid. It's constantly moving and shifting, and we'll kind of see how it shakes down. But last little topic here, Marcos. Brandon Aiyuk. Now, you and I have talked about Brandon Aiyuk for a long time. And I mean, look, he was one of my favorite players for years. I loved Brandon Aiyuk, just being on the 49ers, everything that he brought to the 49ers, just an ultimate dog. And then everything happened with the drama. And look, I mean, I'm ready to move on, I'll be honest. But some interesting kind of news came out recently in the last day or so, and that was that the 49ers are they're in no rush to waive or release Brandon Aiyuk. And mind you, if they release him right now, I think the likely team that takes him is the Commanders. There's ties there, both with coaching staff and with Jaden Daniels. So it makes a lot of sense for him to go there. There's been ties previously between those two parties. So it would likely be like a 1-year prove-it deal for him. But the 49ers, that's like if they released him. Otherwise, they're going to look to trade him. And if they look to trade him, like, you're probably going to get a 6th or 7th round pick. It's not going to be any crazy value, but that's kind of the situation you've run into with voiding his guarantees and this whole thing and how it's shaken down. And he hasn't done himself any justice either. But if the 49ers do release Brandon Aiyuk, just some quick things here. So he signed a 4-year, $120 million contract in 2024. Holy crap, that's a huge amount of money. Some of that money is already guaranteed or prorated into the salary cap. If they released him normally, the team would have absorbed about $29.6 million in dead cap. If they release him with a post June 1st designation, the cap hit can be split. And that would be $13.3 million in 2026 and $21.2 million in 2027. And a quick reminder, like, dead cap means money counting against the salary cap for a player who isn't on the roster anymore. You don't want that. You don't want dead cap money at all, because it just ties you up. And the 49ers have a good deal of it after a lot of the max exodus that happened last year and now this as well. The positives for it would be they save some future money. The 49ers avoided about $27 million in guarantees for 2026. That's awesome, which means they aren't forced to pay him that amount anymore. So this whole thing, again, is going to be wild to see how it shakes down. And I know from an outside perspective, it's got to be just cringy watching both of these parties kind of, play the way they have in the past, 2 years. It's been hell covering this whole thing and keeping up with it, as it's fluid, constantly moving, and been messy. I'm going to be honest with you. Whatever happens, I'll be glad to be done talking about Brandon Aiyuk as a 49er, because it's just just feels like we're beating a dead horse at this point. So that's all the news that I've got to talk about as far as the 49ers end of things. I love what they're doing right now, and you know, they've kind of set themselves up for a run here to potentially, you know, make a run at the Super Bowl this year. So we'll see how the draft looks. We'll see if other moves happen, and we'll go from there.
Heck yeah, that's all good. I did have one last little nugget on Odighizuwa that I saw today. Something to monitor in the whole 49ers injury curse of it all, but he's extremely healthy. He's only missed one game his whole career. Did you say that already? I don't know if you did or not. So that was the part I'm like thinking all this stuff, but yeah, I think he's played 87 eligible games. He's played 86 of them, and he missed in the first game he missed was in his rookie season. So you're getting a steady presence on the inside too, like someone who can hopefully, you know, stay healthy. So I just, you know, something to monitor when we talk about, you know, Mike Evans, people are like expecting it to happen, but like with, you know, for Odighizuwa, if something happens to them, anything can happen in football, but it would just be something to monitor for you substation fans out there. So we'll pivot on that.
Well, you know, I avoided saying that because I'm trying not to jinx anything, but I can tell you right now, that substation is like in the corner, just like, it's ready, bro. It's looking at Odighizuwa like, yeah, you thought you could escape, huh?
That's worse because he was traded here. That's the different part too. It's not like he came here willingly like Mike did. But enough about that. So we will pivot on. So yeah, a lot of moves there in San Francisco. Things going on, big moves, little moves. You guys shored up some good spots with a lot of moves still left to be made. So we'll see what happens with the San Francisco 49ers, and we will keep you up to date as that goes. Now we'll pivot on over to the Philadelphia Eagles, who quiet. For all, you know, there's not a lot of news, guys. We're going to be talking about more about dudes leaving than the dudes who came along. So let's start with that too. I think that's the most important part. When we talk about the departures, we got guys that we had talked about in last week's episode, and that was Nakobe Dean, Reed Blankenship. Nakobe went on to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 3-year, $36 million deal. It's a very affordable contract for him. Yeah, and that's a cool story. I'll tell you in a second. He did choose the Raiders over the Cowboys. And Reed Blankenship is now a Houston Texan, and you know he signed there. That's a great signing for them, culture-wise. D'Amico, that awesome defense already. He's going to fit just fine. And I want to give both of them a shout out. Thank you for all your guys' hard work. You know, you guys helped. Were big pieces and part of the main reasons our defense was as elite as it was and got us to the Super Bowl and was able to win it all. But Nakobe's story was cool because how this worked in the offseason, the NFL gives teams 5 Zoom meetings for players that they are interested in. Nakobe was one of those Zoom meetings for the Cowboys. He was talking with friends and family, and he was split, you know, because the Cowboys offered a similar deal for Nakobe Dean. It was reported that they offered something very similar. And Nakobe said that he felt it in his gut that, you know, when in reality he knew that he would get a ton of backlash if he joined the rival, and I appreciate him staying loyal. And he said it was 51-49 Vegas, and he ended up choosing Vegas. So that was a cool little nugget. Like, hey, you trolled the Cowboys a little bit. Nice that none of our guys ended up on the Cowboys. That was something I was concerned about. Like, I thought Reed was going there too, but he goes to Houston. So that was the big news that went on. And then the big one that we thought we were going to get, we thought we were going to re-sign Jalen Phillips. That didn't happen. He went to Carolina and got his bag for 4 years, $120 million, $30 million for Jalen Phillips. The Eagles were, when they were going into this free agency, they weren't expecting to pay him. Like, I think they were going to try and pay him like 26. Like at the max, and then they just got an offer, you know, that they weren't going to max out on. Sucks, but we also got a 3rd round comp pick for him, so it's like we don't lose him for, you know, we don't get nothing for him. And at the same time, the Eagles will explore other options. Jonathan Grenard is a name. You know, Max Crosby is not out there. We'll talk about that in a second, but like, there are still options to be had, and they could also do it in the draft as well. But they still have Nolan Smith. Brandon Graham has announced he's come back. They got Jalix Hunt. So they're not dead in the rights without Jalen Phillips, right? So I think there's still moves that they can be that can be made, and Howie's definitely monitoring those things. But the big news on the defensive line was that Jordan Davis signed a 3-year, $78 million extension, making him the highest paid nose tackle in NFL history, not just, you know, in the current state, in NFL history. So interesting, like the the discussion around Jordan Davis was like, he's an awesome young player, great locker room guy, but the numbers don't really, stand out for me. And a great year last year. He had like almost a breakout year. He played the most snaps of his career, and he's slimmed down. He's looked really good. So the meaning behind this is that, they're thinking that there's another gear that Jordan Davis has. And I don't mind. I don't mind them taking this risk on a young player. You homegrowned him. He's one of the Georgia boys. Like, he is a positive light. I think he's the future Brandon Graham of this team. Like, he'll be here his whole career being the shining light for this team who loves and supports the city. So I'm happy he got paid. I was shocked at the number. $26 million a year for him is a lot. Especially when we got another extension around the corner with Jalen Carter, which has been announced that that's what they're doing now. Like, they're focusing on extending Jalen Carter. There was random reports from not real people that said, the Eagles are taking calls for Jalen Carter. That was fake. That wasn't legitimate reporting. I don't know what happened there, but they're not shopping Jalen Carter. So the problem is, how much are they going to pay him? Because if Jordan Davis is worth $26 million to the Eagles, how much more is Jalen Carter worth? So that's going to be the number that we need to monitor. Is like, he's probably going to hit $30 million, but if he hits like exactly $30 million, like let's say he gets a Jalen Phillips contract, I'm cool with that. That's awesome. Perfect number for a max extension guy. But I will not be surprised if he goes as high as 40 because of some of these other guys you're talking about here. They're going to reset the market, the Eagles are, and they're going to make it annoying for other teams who want to re-sign their dudes here in the future. But overall, your take on some of those early moves, that for, us losing some of those guys, do you think losing Nakobe and Reed and Jalen will really have an effect on the Eagles? Not that I'm saying like, we're going to be just fine without them, but do you think that we take a step back without those guys?
I think the one that I'm the most worried about for you guys is losing Jalen Phillips. And I think that there's kind of two ways to that. The first is like, you guys expected to bring him back. And so like, when you expect to bring a player back and then it doesn't happen, or even before you get to that point, when you expect to bring a player back, he's not a part of necessarily your plan of replacing, right? So you kind of develop this plan going into the offseason of where you want to address things. And then all of a sudden, this guy who you guys bring in last season, who's been awesome, think the vibes are all there between both parties. And then he signs this insane contract. I'm going to say like wild that Carolina went all in on that. Right. And kind of takes him out from under you guys. Now you guys are left with a hole that you otherwise didn't expect to have to fill. And so, I think from that standpoint, I'm like the most worried about, that edge presence with you guys. Cause you're going to talk about a key addition here in a minute that the numbers look good from that standpoint, from that player. But a lot of it is contingent on what that defensive line is able to do, especially at that position in general. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see. I'm going to be closely watching, like, kind of how Howie goes about the draft, because I think the draft is where you guys are going to address that edge presence. You guys hit on draft picks like no other team. So and I mean, last year drafting blanking on his name right now. Campbell. Yeah. Like, he's a Swiss Army knife in a lot of ways. You can kind of move them all over. And I expect a similar style player, which there are a few of those out there, especially the linebackers position, that you can move to the edges and so on. Like, I expect another one of those players, just a movable piece to add to that Vic Fangio system. But of those guys that you guys lost, I was braced for the other guys. It was the Jalen Phillips one that shocked me, and I kind of has me wondering where the direction goes from here. That's all.
Yeah, it's true. We'll see what options are available for us, because again, I think the rumors lately are now, the Eagles might pivot towards Jonathan Grenard and trading for him. Do they, trade a third-round pick for him, a guy who's put up 12 sacks in the past 2 seasons? So it's like you could get a replacement comparable. Now, we're basically starting off with the defensive line that we walked into last year with obviously some different vets. And that didn't go so well until Jalen Phillips got there. So that's not something I want to ignore. But maybe Jalen Carter comes back way healthier. Maybe Jordan Davis takes that next step. Nolan Smith in a prove-it contract year. This is his last year of his rookie deal. Maybe he goes and just tears it up. And Jalix Hunt, obviously, maybe he takes another step that he did last year too. So there's still potential for the D-line. But losing Phillips, you're right. The Eagles were going into this free agency thinking that they were going to get him. Like, they were going to be able to re-sign him. They planned around that. And they obviously pivoted when they didn't. So let's talk about some of the pivots that they made. So without Jalen Phillips, they really didn't do much, right? So they added to the tight end room. They re-signed Grant Calcaterra, brought him back, and they signed another tight end, Johnny Munt, who was previously with Jacksonville, who has played with our offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion, during their time together on the Minnesota Vikings back in 2022. So he's familiar with the system. He's familiar with the guy. But we get Johnny Munt's a true run-blocking tight end that we just kind of haven't had since Jack Stoll. So we need that. And Grant Calcaterra, the Eagles really like him. He's made big plays for us over the past few years, and Jalen trusts him. They've played together since college, so there is that familiarity there. He just gets hurt a lot. He gets concussed a lot. He almost retired before he even got in the NFL because of concussion. So it's like, I like Calcaterra. I just never know what to expect with him. And he's not a run blocker. We saw that last year. But when we talk about that, the tight end room, when we had last talked, we talked about how Dallas Goedert was potentially leaving. That doesn't appear to be the case anymore. There is apparently an open window now. The Eagles, they designated this basically with the NFL. They are not designating Dallas Goedert as a free agent. He is not officially a free agent yet. So they voided this. I forget exactly how they described it, but they basically voided his free agency designation to give them 2 additional days up until Friday to try and come up with an extension or sign a deal of any kind, even a 1-year deal. So, for example, let's say they sign Goddard to a 1-year, $10 million deal. If they do that by Friday, the Eagles don't have to take on the $20 million in dead cap that they would take if he leaves or if he becomes a free agent. So even if he re-signs with the Eagles after he becomes a free agent, they still have to take on that $20 million dead cap hit. But if they sign him for $10 million, then on the dead cap is only $10 million. So we save $10 million or don't have to take on $10 million. So that's the kind of the motivation for the Eagles to re-sign Goddard. And Goddard's market, we did this last year. We did the same dance where we told him, hey, if you want to go ahead and take a look at your market and see if you like another opportunity. But you have a system where your QB loves you. You had your most productive season in the red zone and everything like that, the numbers wise. Why not just come back, run it back? So hopefully we get Goddard back. And I think, again, we talked about what a security blanket that would be for Jalen. So keep an eye on that for Friday. Up until Friday, we could see a deal, by the time this recording comes out, we could see a deal today or Friday. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But then there's only one other signing on this freaking thing. So we were really, really quiet, guys, because money-wise, the Eagles, again, they went on this with Jalen Phillips, and they're like, okay, now they don't get him. Where do we want to address? They decided to address their cornerback 2 position, and they brought in Tariq Woolen, cornerback from the Seattle Seahawks, coming off of their Super Bowl win. They signed him up to, it says $15 million, but it's a $12 million contract that can go up to $15 million based off of incentives and playing time. I love this move for multiple reasons of the amount. You're taking a chance on a guy, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But he's played good football. Now, he popped off in his rookie year. Kind of been meh since, but his tools, his traits scream this is a Howie Roseman guy. He's freaking 6'4", 210, can run a 4.26 40. And he's one of the stickiest corners in man coverage. So I can just imagine Quinyon Mitchell on one side, Tariq Woolen on the other side, and Cooper DeJean. There's not many cornerback trios that you can sit there and say are better than the 3 guys that the Eagles have. He's an upgrade over Adoree. And Adoree ended up playing decently well at the end of the year last year. But if Adoree Jackson was 6'4", Adoree would be signing a multi-year deal. Having that size on the outside, especially when we go up against a team like the 49ers who just gained some size on the outside, we can hang and compete with some of those if they want to dare. If next year this upcoming year, instead of daring teams to beat Adoree Jackson, we're daring them to beat Tariq Woolen. We might not have Reed on the back end anymore, but having those 3 corners will mitigate not having that safety that's established yet. So you, being a San Francisco 49er, having tons of familiarity going up against with the Niners going up against Riq Woolen. What is your take on the Eagles getting Riq Woolen? I know you may not be as high on him as like the player itself, but do you think this is a good addition for the Eagles?
I think Riq Woolen's trash. No, he was quietly a guy that I was hoping the 49ers would kind of take a ticket on in a lot of ways. And that's kind of what this is. This is a prove it year contract for him. And it's to kind of see if one, he can get back to early career shape, like you said, and two, and this is where the conversation kind of goes with him, if he's got what it takes to kind of keep his composure. I mean, we saw last year, it was his game against the Rams, and Riq has a great pass breakup. It should have been a pick. And he has this great pass breakup, and it was, I think he forced the Rams into a punt, and he just starts jawing. He starts jawing at Puka Nacua, and then he starts going down the whole freaking Rams sideline, just looking at every single person, Sean McVay, everyone. And then he gets to Matt Stafford, and he's in Matt Stafford's face, and it resulted in there was some penalty, and I think the Rams were able to stay out in the field, right? Yeah. So there's momentary lapses of professionalism with him, but like overall, he's like previously that early career trajectory for him is what you're hoping he gets back to. Became the Pro Bowler in 2022. He tied the NFL lead with 6 interceptions as a rookie. And over his career, he has the 12 interceptions and 53 pass breakups. So, the short-term prove-it deal for Philly is, I think, like, it's probably the best deal you guys could have gotten right now. You immediately got better. He adds speed. He adds playmaking ability to that Eagles secondary. And, it's part of kind of a retooling of that defense that I think was very much needed, especially with some of these departures. So I think it's a solid pickup for you guys. And especially at the money, like you said, $12 million base salary with a 15 incentive base. Like, it's a really friendly contract for both parties. And any time a player is on a prove it deal, you're going to get the best play out of them. And even if that best player isn't what, it takes to be on this team, now and you only had a season of it. So I think a season of Riq Woolen, you're going to find stuff in him that you like. And I think ultimately you guys will be re-signing him, but time will tell.
Yeah. And what makes this important is the connection that he has to our defensive line coach, Clint Hurt. Clint Hurt was the Seattle Seahawks defensive coordinator in 2022. And he ran a Vic Fangio style defense. So that was Riq's best year. That's when he shined. So it'll be interesting to see if, that you get that familiarity in the room. You wonder. So circling back to what you said about his boom or bust, right? That game that you were talking about against the Rams, NFC Championship game, makes that incredible play. He's step for step in Puka Nacua's hip pocket, makes a great play on 3rd down, results in a penalty because he's taunting like a jackass, and then the very next play he gets burned for a touchdown. So that was the sequence. So that's the boom and the bust that you get with Tariq Woolen, right? And he's been benched multiple times, and he's had some mental lapses. That's his issue. And I hope, the problem with this kind of guy is this could be a guy that Vic Fangio is like, dang, these two, like, he can turn him into something special. Or by week 5, Vic Fangio's like, this guy just doesn't have it. It's like we're not seeing him on the field. So there is potential for that. I'd like to believe that, his traits and his ability to create turnovers, his ability to recover when he does make a mistake, hopefully he just cleans that up a bit and, plays with that fire. I like the fiery player that he is, but he does miss a lot of tackles. That's not his strength. So there are going to be some things that he needs to clean up here, but I think in this defense, he's going to get a lot of opportunities. No one's going to want to throw to Quinyon or Cooper. He's going to get targeted a lot, and I think that if he cleans up the penalties, he's definitely one of the most penalized guys out there too. So it's just one of those things that if he can clean up those little details, he could have a huge year this year. And if that means somebody else paying him, that's fine. Or if that means us paying him and we just lock up those 3 dudes for the next 5 years, I'm cool with that too. So overall, I was really happy with the Riq signing. And then the last thing to note for the Eagles is AJ Brown. Got to talk about that because we were talking about whether or not he'd get traded. It's been reported now by multiple sources that the window for an AJ Brown trade to happen now is closed. And they were doing this dance with the Patriots where they're basically just staring at each other, waiting for, one of us to blink. And the Patriots thought they had leverage by signing Romeo Doubs, but they could still potentially go after AJ. But for the Eagles, they won't be able to make this trade until after June 1st. And they can't make a trade. They could make a trade now designated for post June 1st, but they can't get anything for it now. So they're just probably going to wait until June 1st and then figure it out after the fact for any teams that potentially want to trade him. AJ hasn't come out and said that he doesn't want to be here or that he's excited to go elsewhere, but there was a reporter, John McClain, who is super in touch with the Eagles, who had mentioned that the Eagles couldn't get a deal done. AJ's, still okay with being gone. He voiced it on the record that AJ's cool with a move, that he's cool with a change of scenery, but right for now, the Eagles aren't. AJ won't be the decider. The Eagles will be. So just like I said last week, they're not going to budge. If you want AJ Brown, you're going to pay what the Eagles want. And whether or not that happens, that's up to chance. And maybe if he's still on the roster, I think he might still be a good soldier. AJ's a professional. He said he loves Philly. I just doubt that he would tank his own value. But then again, we've seen worse before from other players, and he's been a vocal player. So we'll see. But I haven't heard him say, I want out. That's been the thing that has yet to be said. I want out. That's Philly media saying that he wants out. So until that happens, I'm cool with him being on the team. So that's the AJ Brown news of it all. I would say any final thoughts here, but I think that, we've been going on here for 50 minutes. I think there's a couple other things we can kind of talk about, big moves of the offseason. Guys, we want to talk about some of these stories, but we are on a time crunch here. So let's pivot on over here to the NBA, to the Sacramento Kings, who are playing, who just started a game here against Chicago, but they won the game of the century, the Tank Bowl, against the Indiana Pacers, where they were down 20. And it seemed like a game that we were ready to give it away. And then our boy, Devin Carter, has 24 points, 22 of them being in the fourth quarter alone, just explodes. And Maxime Reynaud hits a tough and one to put the game out of reach. And the lineup for the entire fourth quarter was young guys, Drew Eubanks for a second, and then Maxime Reynaud. So young guys to finish the thing. So I want to take a second on Carter, but before I do that, the game itself, I miss winning games, bro. I miss watching this team win games. So did that kind of game, seeing that happen, the comeback like that, and we won against Chicago recently too. We're stringing together a couple wins. Are you noticing kind of a change in the air especially with these young guys, on their confidence, in some of these games?
I actually love that you asked me that, because I was sitting there and I was watching last night's game, and I had missed the first quarter, but then I watched from then on out, and I watched the comeback happen, and I watched Golden One Center explode multiple times. And this is a team who's won 16 games at that point, right? And I'm just watching the energy, and I'm seeing the guys on the court and the energy that they're bringing, and Devin Carter having this insane fourth quarter, 22 points, finishing with 24, and it's I miss so badly being so invested in every single game to the point I am crashing out at each play. It really made me think back to the playoff run. Not that this was anything similar, right? But it had me thinking back to the energy and how much I just miss the competitive basketball. And granted, Indiana is full on tanking as well, right? So that there was a reason why they blew a 20-point lead, because they want that number one pick too. But it because of the skill gap not being as wide as if we were playing, say, like an OKC. And it being that much more of a competitive game, like it just made me crave watching competitive Kings games again. And I think that we have gotten, like, in the past, 2-3 weeks, I think we've gotten more of these competitive games, even if they've come out, as the losers. Like, looking even at a game like the Pelicans where they had a lead, the Kings had a lead for the majority of that game, and then, just kind of blew it as it, came down the stretch. And in that game, they played the veterans. Yeah. So at this point, I'm kind of like, I'm at a point, Marcos, where it's like, it feels like you play the veterans, you get the loss. You play the young guys, you have a lot of fun, and you might even eke out a win. But, it's been a kind of a wild week from the Kings standpoint, because you also had Russell Westbrook, kind of lighting up Sacramento media, specifically 2 different people. And I think it's something that it's an energy that this Kings media hasn't really seen before. And I would just kind of go on the record and say, like, Russell Westbrook does this to every media that he goes to address. Like, he was even asked by one guy at that presser, like, if this was like, some of the worst media coverage or something like that you've seen. He was like, not even close. Yeah. Like, not even close. And I'm going to say it because it's been painful. It has been painful to cover this team this year. But the bright spots, specifically a game like last night, we talked about it where it's like, you asked me a question of like, would you be upset if they start winning some games here and down the stretch? And I'm like, no, not really, because it's like, you're probably not going to get the number 1 pick. Let me put it this way. The chances of us getting the number 1 pick do not favor us. Yeah. No matter the position we're in. You just don't get that favor, right? And that's just how it shakes down. No matter your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 worst team in the league, like, your chances remain very similar to those around you. And it's low. So it's like, why not rattle off a few wins and get it going here? And I think those bright spots have really kind of shown through, and we've seen some of the young guys developing as the stretch is gone here. And you have these Devin Carter games where 50 Cent is like, is dapping up Vivek on the knee and like, kind of hyping him up. And then they're all lighting the beam and we got the Beam Boys out. Like, it's energy and it's vibes that this, not just the team needs, but this fan base needs, because it has been a tough year for the media. It's been a tough year for the fans, and it's been a really tough year for that organization, especially those players. A lot of these guys haven't lost this many games in their careers. And these rookies, you get drafted into the NBA. In high school, you're a superstar. Yeah. In college, you're pretty damn good at basketball. And you're good enough that you're probably not a losing team. Because if you're a losing team in high school or college, odds are no eyes are on you. So for a lot of these guys, this is like new grounds, right? Like, even Keegan talked about it early in the season. Like, he's never lost this many games in his life. And so I think that getting some of these good vibes at the end of the season, as he starts to wind down here and you brace for the end, like, getting some of these wins, it's really going to help this team from a development standpoint and a lot of these guys. So to cap it, I like what I've seen so far, like, especially in this past week since we last talked. Like, it has been kind of refreshing to watch this team, even though, yeah, it's been more losses. It's just been more enjoyable to watch this team.
Now, I couldn't agree more. And so I want to take a second personally to just talk about Devin Carter, because I remembered not 2 years ago when we did this whole draft process of it all, we went through that particular draft. I was super high on him. So high, in fact, that I projected him to go to the Sacramento Kings, and they did just that. They drafted him. I was like, oh my God, let's go. They drafted my boy. Like, every single time we watch Devin Carter play, it's not always pretty. It's not always he's a different kind of player. When he was in Providence, he was the guy. But he wasn't just the guy there. What he did was impactful, and he has the ability to just take over a stretch of games take over a stretch of a game for like 5-6 minutes where he's the best player on the floor and he's doing everything that matters, and he's aggressive, and he goes, and when he gets going, he's a really hard player to stop. And It's on the offensive end. It's on the defensive end. We saw it last night. He was the catalyst of this team. The second he came in, all of a sudden the spark was there. And he wouldn't have even touched the floor if Malik Monk was hurt. It didn't get hurt. So he never has gotten an opportunity here. He was, when they drafted him, I didn't even realize his shoulder situation. So he started 6 months behind the 8 ball, never really been able to come back. And he's been up and down, losing minutes, losing rotational minutes, getting some here and there. And even last night, like, he finished the game really well, but he did tweak his ankle, so he's not going to be playing tonight. So we don't know. I don't know how long. So that's the other thing too. He's just not getting enough of a consistent run. And I really do hope that next year, when, you're integrating this next rotation of young guys, when it's Nick, Maxime, and Devin Carter coming off the bench, I mean, I would hope that Devin sees some of those minutes, because I think what he offers is 6th man of the year potential. Like, he can be that guy, that microwave scorer, like a Malik. He can be the Malik replacement once he's gone. There's a villain aspect to Devin Carter where, like, I don't think many people know how to feel about him when they play. I don't think the opposing teams like going up against him because he's physical and he gets in your grill and he doesn't care. And we don't have those kind of players. And I stopped talking about Carter because he wasn't seeing the floor. And I'm not just going to waste time just advocating for a guy who's never going to see the floor. I wanted it to happen, but until it happened, it was kind of like what we ran into with Keon. So I hope that, hopefully this ankle injury isn't too bad and he gets some run here in the next few weeks, because, like, they need to know what they have with this kid. And I think that he's really talented, and maybe his ceiling isn't, best player on the team, but he is a serviceable player who does things that impact the game. We saw it. Like, he impacts the game in a positive way. He plays a little selfish. The ball can kind of stall with him sometimes, but he also is basically a rookie in experience as well. He's played less games than Maxime and Nick at this stage of their careers. So it's like he is so far behind the 8 ball. He's shooting, like, going into the game, he was 15% from 3 on the season. Like, he hasn't gotten a rhythm. And despite that, you see all the traits there. So a game like last night with 50 Cent and all that, I remember they said 50 Cent was calling for Carter while he was in an interview, trying to get him to come light the beam. Like, he was excited about watching Devin Carter play. And I think Carter has that kind of energy. And I really hope that, even if it's early next year, like, he deserves. We've spent the 13th overall pick on him. If we weren't going to be able to get any trade value on him, we got to play him so we can boost his value to see what they got. So that's my Devin Carter rant. But, like, my guy, like, I've been super high on him since he's been drafted, and I just feel bad because I just never know. I still don't know if he's going to get a real opportunity. But he's under contract next year, and I hope he gets a real chance. So that's my rant on Devin Carter.
Yeah, and I mean, just to top it off, it's like, agreed, like, you won't know who you're going to get with him unless you play him. And the other side of it, too, was, like, they weren't playing him for so long in such a stretch that when he came in, he felt like he needed to, like, do something, productive. And so he'd force a lot of stuff. And it's like, you need to play him for a consistent stretch. I'm not talking a stretch of minutes in a game. I'm talking a stretch of basketball games. You need a stretch of games to consistently play him and let him get comfortable coming in, doing his thing, going out, and knowing he's going to come back in again in the next week. Otherwise, he's just going to continue forcing stuff and having these 22-point fourth quarters where you're like, is that really who he is? Or was he just forcing it and it worked out this time, right? So I really like Devin Carter. I joined that train with you, like, when you were high on him and we drafted him. And I was like, bet, like, yeah, this is the Monty guy. This is the Monty pick. It's absolutely a guy that, I can see the Kings, utilizing. And it just hasn't really panned out since he came back from that shoulder injury. So I hope he gets some consistent run. And I hope that, we really find out who exactly he is before, he moves on, like a Keon Ellis, who, by the way, is thriving out in Cleveland. Shocker, right? But yeah, I like Devin. I like his jump shot. I don't care that it looks ugly. It goes in.
One of the prettiest swishes, bro. Like, when he shoots it and it goes through, bro, it's through the net. Like, it's like he has a funky jump shot, bro. But when he hits, he's a really good player, and it's a shame because not only does he not get the same level of run, but he also doesn't get the same level of leash that some of these young guys that they're giving, like Nick Clifford. And I love Nick because he's a rookie. I want him to be doing what he's doing, but like Carter can't shoot 4 for 12 and then play the next game. That's not how they're doing it with him. He needs to go out there and impact the game, and then, oh, okay, you'll earn your minutes, and then as soon as you turn the ball over 4 times, you're done for 2 weeks until we need you again all of a sudden. So I just wish that there was a little more room for error on his part, because how, like you said, how is a player supposed to gain confidence without consistency? And that's the challenge that he's going to be facing for at least another year here, until maybe another, whether he's gone or we package him in a trade, or whether we actually do give him an opportunity, we'll see. But like, I do find it interesting. It's just so interesting to me how they treat him, especially when we hear some things about from him on the back end, like about his eating habits or maybe his attitude, on how he carries himself. Maybe not the most like personable guy, but he played really well last night, and he had a really humble interview, and he spoke extremely professionally. So I just think that like there is a player there. So I hope that Carter has that chance. So did you have any final thoughts on the Kings here before we move on? Okay, perfect. Shout out to Maxime and Neek and all you guys. Maxime, that and one at the end was hype. I was so gassed up when he hit that to close out the game. So that was definitely good. So let's pivot on. We got to do this now. We're in a new position, guys. We're picking from the second spot on this NBA draft lottery simulator. So let's pull this up here. All right. So Indiana taking the top spot now that we beat them. So let's see. Maybe will our odds increase with now that we're in second? Let's see. Oh my God, here we go again. So see, we're destined for the 5th pick, bro. So in this week's simulator, we got Brooklyn number 1, Indiana number 2. See, the top spot didn't get number 1 though. And then 3, Chicago. How did they get this pick? Washington and Sacramento. So at 5th, we got some. Pick a guard, buddy, because that's what it's going to end up being. Who are you feeling at that number 5 spot?
I think for me, it's Kingston. Okay. I think for me, I'm taking Kingston Fleming there. Like you said, it's got to be a guard at that point. I think all the other guys we've been talking about consistently would be off the board. And with Kingston, like, he has some upside. And he kind of fits what the Sacramento Kings look for in a guard. So I could find myself being okay taking Kingston Fleming here.
And in this position, I do the same thing. I think that, they're playing the Big 12 tournament right now. AJ had a really good game. Amazing. So this Big 12 tournament's going to show us a lot about a lot of these top 5 guys, because we'll see 3 of them in there. So, no, I think, you can make an argument for Keaton Wagler, Darius Acuff, Michael Brown. Those are going to be the guys in that bucket. It is going to be the flavor of point guard you want. The best do-it-all guy, kind of, that screams Kingston Flemings to me. And I like everything he would bring to the table. So in this instance, we will pick 5th. We're both locking in on Kingston Flemings. What a freaking bummer, dude. This is what I'm talking about. Like, we could have the worst record. And for all you Kings fans out there who are like, pissed off that we're winning games, let's be real. What are the odds that if we get the worst pick, that we're going to somehow break the streak and be the number 1 pick? And I say this knowing that if it's freaking Indiana who gets the worst record, they're going to somehow win this freaking draft. So it's Sacramento's luck. I just don't anticipate us getting the number 1 pick one way or the other. But gosh, I hope we can fall into the top 4. That would be the most ideal spot.
Yeah, I mean, top 4 would be great. If we can get top 3, it's such a win. That to me is such a win. And I think past, if you start winning some games, you find yourself like the 3rd worst record. It's worth considering if you're like the 6th or 7th pick. It's worth considering trading back. We had that conversation. There might be a trade package out there that somebody puts together that has a nice young piece for you, and you can move back and still find a good role player. Like, there's so many options out there. But yeah, to expect the number 1 pick as the worst team by record, considering the streak that we're on, it's just so unlikely, and especially knowing the Kings' luck. So yeah.
And we got to be careful here. I mean, if we keep winning games, we're only two. If we the difference between second where we are now and fourth is a game. Like Washington Wizards are fourth right now, and they're 2 games ahead of us. They have 17 wins. So, we could realistically, if we all of a sudden peel off a win streak here, going up against a cookie cutter schedule that we are to finish the year, there's a chance that our spot is 4th or 5th already, and that opens up the door to just this nonsense of like, oh god, we're gonna pick 10th, and then the Kings are like, we should have tanked, like, but screw it. I want to win games. I want these young guys to win some games. So, if that's what it takes. I don't know what we're going to be doing tonight. I think they're embracing the tank tonight. Obviously, Malik was hurt last game, so I don't know how long he'll be hurt for. Devin got hurt, so he's not playing. Russ was ruled out in this game too. Killian Hayes playing 40 minutes in this game. I don't know what's going to... So, we probably will rack up a loss here against the Bulls team that, is also trying to tank. And, Charlotte, you're right. Pardon me. We're playing Charlotte. Against a Charlotte team that's cooking, and a Charlotte team that has that Beam Team 1 energy to them. So let's see if this group can hold their own. We'll see how serious they are about winning these games. So we'll find that out. But any final thoughts on the Kings before we close out the pod? All right. So you heard it here first. So this was episode 123 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all you guys watching on YouTube right now, all of our social medias are up above. For all you audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow the show. We appreciate all your love and support as we enter this very exciting time, NFL off season. March Madness is next week. We are doing a bracket right here on the pod. We're going to have a BTB bracket. We're going to go through team by team, game by game. We're going to argue. We're going to try and, figure out a bracket that we can agree on, and we can also do our own personal ones on the side and maybe just talk about that. But you and I are going to have a very interesting conversation next week on, picking a national title winner going into next week. So we'll figure that out. But with that being said, guys, my name is Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week.
Peace.